Hello, everyone. This is Randolph Scourge, stepping in for Professor Tarantula and Mr. Crenshaw, who is still dealing with some recalcitrant dogmen on his mountain property. Mr. Tarantula has forwarded me the following tale. Remember, some names have been changed to protect the identities of witnesses and the locations of certain incidents. I don't blame them. I don't want a bunch of dirty, unwashed internet people invading my personal space either. Please remember to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel. These tiny acts of minor inconvenience matter a great deal to the people who work to provide you with this entertainment. Now, with no further delay, the Ballad of Shepherd Parnell. My name is Andrew Fitzgerald, and I live in Maka Township in Michigan. When I saw this channel on YouTube, I thought I'd send you my experience with Dogman. I think it qualifies. Anyway, I've lived in this area my whole life. My parents operated an orchard, and I took over when they passed on. I'm in my 90s now, and my son is helping me write this out and send it to you. I believe this happened in the late 80s, or maybe it was the early 90s. We lived out in the boonies, well away from any major city. The closest population center at the time was Hammett Junction, a little village about 10 miles down the dirt road that runs past my house. There was a gas station and a diner and a little bar down there. It had a couple of stores too, which made up the main street back then. Hardware store, dime store, post office, police department with 2 patrol cars, an ice skating rink, soda shop, and the usual spattering of professional services, your electricians, appliance repair, plumbers, and such. There was a used car dealer too, and a YWCA. Now, when I was a kid, there was a story about Dogman. This half dog, half man was supposed to come from the devil. It was sighted in the fall mostly, and was seen raiding vegetable gardens and garbage cans and moonshine stills. This naturally pissed people off. So there was sightings of this thing, but it was all word of mouth. It was hard to tell what was true. It was getting into Mavis Freely's tomatoes one day, and the next it was dragging Butch Harlow's garbage can out of the back parking lot of his body shop and making a mess. The local junkyard, owned by Rusty Joe Parnell, seemed to be at the center of many sightings. Rusty lived right next to his sprawling junkyard in a 2-story country home with the standard-sized barn out back. Him and his wife Mabel raised 2 sons, twins, Kenneth and Shepard. Rusty did more than just deal in scrap metal and salvaged parts. He operated a couple of stills in the woods. It was one of those secrets that most people knew about, but nobody mentioned. Heck, the police probably knew about it too, but I'm sure Rusty was smart enough to pay him off, 'cause he never did have no problems. My dad took me to the junkyard a few times. I thought it was cool. Everyone went there, to get car parts, of course. One summer, one of the town drunks, Gary Golensky, vanished. He just up and disappeared. No one could figure out exactly what had become of him, though some said he went to nearby Hammett and caught a bus to Rawlins. No one reported seeing him hitchhiking or giving him a ride. Kenny and Shepherd Parnell were around 15 years old at the time. I can only guess they were bored. They got it into their heads to solve the mystery of Gary Golensky, just like in one of them Hardy Boys books they read. The Dogman became the immediate and primary suspect. It gave the brothers a great excuse to push boundaries and go deeper into the forest. Deeper than they had ever went. To their mother's dismay, they started coming home after dark, so she ordered them to stay out of the woods at night. Maybe if they had obeyed, things would be different. They did not. Shepard went missing in the fall of 1954. The police interviewed Kenny, and a story came out. The boys had spotted something unusual in the woods on the night of Shepard's disappearance, and had decided to follow its tracks. Ken said it looked like a big hairy man with the head of a dog. Dogman. It got ahead of them, and they made the decision to split up as they passed a tangled stand of trees. That was the last time Ken saw his brother. He said he circled the stand of trees several times and couldn't find a trail. It was as if something came down from the heavens and plucked Shepard Parnell off the face of the earth. A search corroborated his story up to that point. The police and local volunteers searched for days, then weeks, and then most people kind of forgot about it. There was nothing new to report. They found no trail, no sign of a body, and no sign of foul play. That didn't keep them from arresting Ken and holding him for a time. He got his day in court soon enough and was shown in the eyes of the law to be innocent. There was a lawsuit after that, I think, and a settlement of some kind with the state. Ken didn't come back right away. Some say he was in a state hospital. Others said he fled the country. All I know is he didn't come back to town for many years, and when he did, it was to take over the junkyard when old Rusty died. Even then, he just kind of slid in and nobody took no notice. By that time, nobody cared. He was there, taking care of business, and that was it. No one said anything. If they did, I didn't hear about it. One day I was having a beer at the local bar, and I overheard a guy say something about the Dogman. We started talking. There was 4 of them, sitting there drinking, flashing a lot of money. Out of Boston, they said. They told me there was a Dogman Museum in town. They had an old flyer that looked like it had been photocopied many times, made of thick orange paper and lines of heavy text beside a crude map and a graphic image of a growling dogman. "See a real dogman," it said. $50 per person. I thought that was pretty steep for a roadside attraction. Inwardly laughing, I bought a round of beers for the boys, figuring they were going to need it. The map, however, was a little confusing. It got them this far, but figuring out where the place was from here seemed problematic until they read the address of the place. I knew right where it was. They offered to pay my way if I showed them how to get there, which was probably smart because most of the roads weren't marked too good. After another round of shots, we were off. It was just down the road from Rusty's junkyard. There was no sign out front, but there was a street number on the mailbox. The driver, I think his name was Tom, parked our vehicle, and a yard light went on above the porch at the house. I guess they had called earlier to arrange this. Why they didn't get better directions at that time was beyond me. An old man came out of the house, leaning on a cane. He introduced himself as Kenneth Parnell. After some small talk, he collected his fee of $50 per person and ushered us around to the back of the house. Though we lived in the same general area, I had never personally met Mr. Parnell. Can't remember ever talking to him, even on those times I went to the junkyard to get a part for my car or something else. I'm sure the lack of recognition was likewise. Mr. Parnell took us to the barn, which was at the back end of a long, overgrown yard next to the forest. It was unexceptional in every way, and smelled of hay, petroleum products, paint, rusty metal, and a fainter, fouler odor that grew stronger as we approached a door at the back of the barn. Just above the door, the words "Dogman Museum" were painted in neat red block letters on a whitewashed plank. Mr. Parnell fumbled in his pocket for a key and then opened the door. Some of us were swaying a little bit. I know I was. The shots were catching up. Mr. Parnell hit a switch in the dark room, and a fluorescent light fixture flared to life. "Come on in, boys." The museum was what I expected. Lots of photocopied articles and pictures on the walls. Nothing new. A glass case with some dubious-looking plaster prints and Native American artifacts, beads and a stone in the shape of an arrowhead. It didn't take more than a minute for the 5 of us to see everything. "Where's the remains?" one of the guys asked. He pulled out the orange flyer. "This says Dogman remains." The emphasis he placed on that last word seemed a little more snotty than the situation warranted, and I wondered if the old man would take offense. I was pretty sure it was intended, having listened to these guys talk for the last hour. "It says here Dogman remains, see?" I forget this guy's name, but he was wearing a Chicago Cubs baseball cap. He shoved the flyer in the old man's face. This is all they'd been talking about. "You got a body?" Tom asked. I was wondering if this guy had anything at all at this point. Even one of those squeezed a bunch of roadkill and cold cuts together and froze it in ice creations. How could it be anything else, right? "Oh, that," he said, looking anxious. You see, that flyer was one of the first ones out when I started this place. That was, 10 years ago." He looked at the flyer closer. "Wasn't orange, though. Not I remember, anyway." A moist burp was our only reaction. "Well, I had a Dogman body. That was a long time back. You know that stuff don't stay good, not even in the freezer. Even if the power didn't cut out a couple of times. And there were years no one was coming around. I wasn't making no money. Freezer started needing repairs. Expensive repairs. So I had to do something. I decided to change things around a little bit. The thing wasn't in the best shape, you know. So one summer a few years back, I took it out and mummified it." For some reason, we all looked at each other and nodded like we understood exactly where this guy was going, but we were just drunk. I could tell these boys were getting a little impatient. "I had it out in the yard under the sun, and I got a bunch of rubbing alcohol at the dime store, and I had all this Epsom salt my dad used for his feet. See, those Egyptians used to mummify their kings and pharaohs and whatnot with salt. It was really hot as Egypt that summer, so I figured I could do it. Well, the thing was getting pretty far gone by then. Some parts turned to mush and just kind of drained away in the lawn as soon as they thawed. I can show you the patch of grass. It's kind of got a funny color." Mr. Parnell pointed over his shoulder with his thumb to somewhere that I assumed was in the yard, and continued. "For a while I sat next to it and swatted flies, but ooh-wee, did it stink. Almighty Lord God, it stunk. Pungent. Even when I tried to breathe through my mouth, I felt like I was tasting it. It smelled so bad I couldn't stand it, so I went back in the house to see if I could rig up some kind of spray or gas mask or something. Well, while I was poking around doing this, some dogs showed up." My eyes traveled to the glass case. I noticed some of the Indian beads looked like teeth. Baby teeth. When I got back out, they were all running around, dragging bones, fighting over different pieces. Shit. Excuse my French. I yelled at them, but they didn't hardly pay me no mind. Some stopped to growl at me and others ran off with bones. I think that's how I lost the legs. I ran back inside and grabbed my shotgun, 12 gauge, and loaded it up. I was gonna take care of them sons of bitches once and for all. The first dog I spotted running with an arm, one bone in its mouth and the other dragging in the grass, held on by a bit of sinew. I shot him. The old man pantomimed, firing a long gun. Well, I didn't have my glasses on. I missed. Scared him off good anyway. I turned on the others and started blasting. And I was so pissed I accidentally shot the rack I'd set up for drying that nasty Dogman body. Some of them bones must have flew 50 feet into the woods. You can find little pieces in the weeds back there still. He pointed again with his thumb and kept talking. I went to look for my glasses, and by the time I got out, the yard was filled with cats. Cats? I remarked as I stared at what I realized was a piece of plastic shaped into an arrowhead shape. Damn forest cats. Forest cats? One of the guys slurred. Yeah, forest cats, you know, they all over the woods. I had never seen more than one cat in the woods in my entire life. Every year there's more of them, Mr. Parnell explained. Like there's some kind of cat factory or something. But, well, that's beside the point. But there was a lot of them, all sniffing around, following the trail of that dog who went and dragged the leg bones in the woods. They meowing and scratching and acting like they just found them a smorgasbord. I mean, my jaw dropped and I just watched them, thinking maybe they'd clean off the flesh, 'cause that wasn't nothing more except a bunch of stinky Dogman hamburger. My mom, bless her soul. He glanced at the ceiling and said, "Love you, Mama," and looked back at us. Well, she liked cats, so I have a hard time shooting those little furry things. But damn, I had to do something, so I tried shooting some warning shots, you know. Sorry, Mama. Glance at the ceiling again. But I winged a couple of them, and worse, I was shooting up my darn Dogman bones too, which were kind of getting dragged all over the yard by then. So I went down there with a broom and I chased them all off. Ooh-wee, boy, did that stink. And then I gathered up all the parts and put them back on the rack after I fixed it, and dragged up a lawn chair and set off a little ways upwind, guarding them. He sighed. Well, it was warm and I kind of fell asleep. I woke up surrounded by birds. One of the guys chuckled. Yeah, I guess it was kind of funny. They was all around me, pecking the bones and the soft parts, tweeting and squawking. I jumped up, yelling, dropped the shotgun, and it went off, and the stock flipped around and smacked me in the head. It knocked me down, and I think I was out for a couple minutes anyway. When I woke up, the cats were chasing the birds. Then I saw some dogs chasing the cats. What I could see of my Dogman was spread out all over the yard and into the woods. At this point, the old man harumphed and took a deep breath. A determined look settled on his face. So I had had enough. I grabbed the head and took it back in the house and put it in the refrigerator, and I got cleaned up. Next day, I went back outside and picked up all the pieces I could find and buried them. You can see the spot and patch where the weeds are a little bushier and greener than the rest. Well, shit. What about what the flyer says? One of my companions pointed out. Dude, this ain't worth $50, another one complained. Nah. Now, I did save the head. Y'all can see that. Amid much grumbling, he escorted us to another room down a short hallway. It stank of disinfectant and an odor that reminded me of roadkill drying in the sun. The door squeaked a little as the old man entered the room. He turned on the light. Here it is, gentlemen. The head of a real, honest-to-God dogman. The little room was divided in two by black and green plastic tape strung from the left wall to the right at waist height, preventing further approach to the thing on the other side. The black head was attached to a post sticking up from a bucket filled with rocks or cement. The overhead light fixture cast stark, cold shadows. A 4-pane window in the wall was cracked open, providing a little bit of ventilation. Outside, I heard crickets. The guys grew quiet. The head was canine-shaped, black and dirty. It looked damaged, like it had been dragged down an oily dirt road. Wires bound it to the post. One cheek was pushed in, and the other bulged out, showing cracked skin and disgusting-looking dried lumps. Inside, there was nothing but more blackened material, impossible to tell if it was flesh or bone. It was nasty. "That ain't real," one of the guys said. "That sure as hell is real," Mr. Parnell said, sounding insulted. "Nah, some bullshit." I didn't know what to think. This thing was right down the road all this time, my whole life, and I never knew about it? That was just as startling to me as anything else. I stared at the thing. The eyes were dark, empty pits that revealed nothing. The skin and everything looked slick and stiff, probably from dried blood, I figured. It didn't have hair to speak of, not even around the ears, which looked like leather chew toys gone bad. "It smells awful," one of the guys stated the obvious. "I think I'm gonna be sick." "Show's over," Mr. Parnell announced. I don't blame him. We reeked of alcohol, and now one of us wasn't feeling so good. If I was him, I wouldn't want to clean up anyone sick. He showed us the door. Mr. Parnell waved us goodbye, and down the road we went. "Hold the fuck on," one of the guys said after we rounded a corner. "Stop!" I thought he was going to be sick when he got out of the car. He whispered something to the driver. Suddenly, I didn't feel right. You guys can just drop me off at the bar, okay?" I said. "Yeah, no problem, man," the driver said, but he made no move to start the station wagon. The other guy remained outside. "Where'd your buddy go?" I asked. "He's taking a crap. Said it would be just a few minutes." It sounded weird to me, but when you gotta go, you gotta go. But after a few minutes of waiting, I decided I didn't want to hang around anymore. These guys were turning into jerks, the way they were talking. "Hey, you guys, it's been a real slice," I said. "I think I might just take a hike home. I only live a little ways from here." I lied. I was about 10 or 15 miles from my place, but I figured I would just hike back to the last road we crossed and hang a left, which would take me to a convenience store where I could call a friend to pick me up. Even if I couldn't get someone, it was only a couple more miles back to the bar, and I was sure I could get a ride there. And a beer. My heart was telling me that something was off, and I should get the hell out of there as fast as possible. "Aw, he's just gonna be a few minutes," the driver said. "He'll be back any second now. We'll go have some more shots." Now I knew something was up, but for some reason, I didn't get out. While I was waiting to change my mind, the driver started the engine and turned on the heater. It was getting a little chilly, after all. More time passed. I got warm, and the urge to split became unbearable. I moved to act on my impulse when suddenly the front passenger door opened. The missing guy jumped back inside. It didn't take long for the smell to reach my nose. I knew immediately where he'd been. The driver threw the vehicle into gear, and the station wagon lurched back on the road. For a brief moment, I considered jumping out. The guys were complaining about the smell, and everybody wanted to get a look at what he stole. What he stole. Okay, if you hadn't guessed it already, this idiot ran back to the Dogman Museum and stole the head. I imagine he used that window to get in. I said nothing and tried not to breathe any more than I absolutely had to remain conscious as we headed back to the bar. As soon as we parked in the lot outside, I said goodbye and made off down the street. That wasn't as easy as it sounded, and for a moment I thought the veneer of plastered friendship was going to drop off before I got away. But aside from a couple of sidelong glances I didn't trust, they went into the bar without causing me any trouble. The police station was only a few minutes away. No one was at the desk in the tiny lobby, so I knocked on the wall until someone appeared. I told them everything. I wanted these creeps busted. They'd wronged one of my neighbors. Even if Mr. Parnell had no idea who I was. Even if I never said one word to Mr. Parnell or anyone in his family that I could remember outside of buying a couple of car parts at the junkyard. These guys were scumbags, treating their little trip into the country as some kind of a trip into a human zoo. See the country people. What friendliness they'd showed to me was purely transactionary in nature, and that guy eyeballing me as they went back into the bar to get blotto was all I needed to convert that assumption into certainty. At some level, I knew I had just escaped getting the crap beat out of me by 4 drunks. Well, of course, that is not the end of this story. The cops went to the bar. After arresting the 4 foul-mouthed and inebriated out-of-towners for public drunkenness, and 1 for drunkenness plus disorderly conduct and assault on a police officer, they searched the station wagon. They found the Dogman head. I thought that was the end of the story, but it wasn't. Things got weird. The head was a mask, but it wasn't a mask like you'd get at a dime store, but a rather clever composite construction. Someone did a lot of work. It was part rubber, part leather, and part other things stitched together, slung over a real mummified head. A mummified human head. Possession of human remains in the state is of course illegal. Punishment can range from a fine to imprisonment. But old man Parnell didn't get fined, and he was only arrested as a matter of procedure. He eventually ended up in a state hospital. Inspection of all local graveyards and cemeteries revealed no clues. Nowhere was there a sign of disturbed remains or unusual activities. That could have been because Kenneth Parnell didn't go to any cemetery or graveyard to get the stuffing for his Dogman costume. It took a DNA test to solve the mystery. The head was locally sourced, after all. It was the head of Shepard Parnell. But any other mysteries concerning his disappearance and how that head came to be will remain unsolved, at least for now. Ken Parnell refuses to talk about the mummified head, or his brother, or anything to do with Dogman.
Wasn't that a lovely story? I hope you liked it. Remember to subscribe to this channel and come back next week for another episode of Dogman Bites.